Hello students, and I'm back with another video. As promised by you, I've already talked about the early Vedic period. Now in this video, we'll be talking about the later Vedic age, political, social, economic and the religious life. And the time period that we will be taking into account is 1000 to 600 BC. All right. Now, what was later Vedic age? I mean, how do you explain later Vedic age? The foremost important thing is that during the later Vedic period, now I had shown you a map, where the most of the areas of the Punjab were occupied by these Aryans. But now in the later Vedic period, they spread from Punjab further into east and south, right? Now they extended their sway to the whole of northern, central and some parts of South India. Now the center of the Aryan world was a firm middle country, land between river Saraswati and the Ganges. Now Punjab, however, retained its old importance. Right. Again, just like the previous video, now this time I haven't made the chart for you because I want you to make it yourself. So write the political, social, religious, economic life and write down all the points underneath that. Now in the political life, we'll be talking about the emergence of new tribes. Now, what was the position of the king about his administration and the local administration? Right. So number one thing is that the king now started having high sounding titles, right? Because I told you that the Aryans expanded over a large part of India by means of conquest or by combining the tribes together, and that led to the rise of several kingdoms, big or small. Now, when the area under the king expanded, it also led to increase in the power of the kings. They assumed high-sounding titles. Powerful kings assumed titles like Sarvabhumi, Lord of the Earth, Ekrat, that is the sole king, Raja Vishwajanani, right? Then his Atharva Ved describes the the king of the Kuru dynasty, that is Parakshit, as Raj Janana, right? Then his Panchal dynasty also produced some important and powerful rulers like Janak, who took the title of Samrat, all powerful. The rulers also performed Rajsua and Vajapiya sacrifice, though the most important was the Asmaved sacrifice, right? So now the king actually, its powers increase because why? There was expansion of the Aryans by means of conquest or by means of amalgamation of tribes. So this led to the increase of the power. They assumed high sounding titles. They performed various sacrifices like Rajsuha, Vajapiya, and the most important was the Asmaved sacrifice. Now, so what was the position of the king now? See, when we talked about the early Vedic period, I told you the king was the head of the tribe. His powers were limited by Sabha and Samiti. He only had three people in his Mantri Parishad: Senani, Grahamani, and Purohit. So, what happened in the later Vedic period? One, see, king was Kshatriya. Although king was hereditary, his post was hereditary, that is, he was elected for life. Now, although it was hereditary, but formal election was not given up totally. So it wasn't that the king was always elected, but yes, of course, there were times when the king was elected, but his position was hereditary. Now, he was expected to rule according to the law of Dharam, right? This is very important. Now, sometimes we actually confuse dharam with religion, but exact meaning of dharam means to walk on the path of righteousness. That means he was to do what is right, right? Now, he was to be deposed or killed if he became a tyrant and an oppressor. According to Mahabharata, the gods do not approve of a defective king, and a wicked king was liable to be killed like a mad dog. Now, the control of Sabha and Samiti on king was now limited. It was not that they altogether they disappeared, but yes, their control over the king was limited. But that did not mean that king was a despot, king was all powerful, so he could exercise it in any way. The greatest exercise or check on the powers of the king was the dharam and the religion. Dharam, the righteous path on which he was supposed to walk on. Right now comes his administration. See, now as his empire expanded, so did the administrative machinery. From just three ministers in the early Vedic period, they had the Purohit, Senani, and Gramani. Now he has a mantri, a Purohit, Sangahatri, the treasurer, Kahatri, the chamberlain, Samagahatri, charioteer, then Shapatis, the provincial governors, and all these ministers were called as the Ratnas. Now, besides the Mantri Parishad, king also sought the advice and help of the nobles and other officials under him. Now, the local administration. See, village still remained the smallest unit which was to be managed by the Gramani. Now, Gramani or the village headman, he was to be appointed by the king. His main duties was to collect the royal dues, that is the land revenue, to lead the village in times of the war. He also formed a channel through which the royal control or the king could exercise control over the village. Now, there was another body, that is the village council, something similar to the village panchayat. They managed police, education, sanitation, and other welfare works. Civil cases were deposed by the panches, though in grave situations, people could ask the king's help. Right. So let's quickly just do that. So first we did the emergence of the high sounding titles, then the position of the king, right, and his administration. Obviously, the Mantri Parishad expanded, then the local administration, and now we come to the social life. You must have noticed that some of the points will be exactly the same as there, but the only thing is that the material under the points, there will be some change. Like we did the family in early Vedic period, then the woman, the position of women, the food and their food, their dress and the ornaments, their ceremonies, amusements, the caste, and the new thing that today we'll do here in later Vedic period is the ashram system. Now, so this is very, very important. Now, if I just give one word for both the Vedic age, if I say that what is the major difference between the early and the later Vedic age? So there's just one word, simple and complex. The life in the early Vedic period was simple. The life in the later Vedic period became complex, and that also is true about the social points, the social relations as well. See, as compared to the Rig Vedic or the early Vedic age, there was certainly a decline in the social position of the woman. One, she could not inherit property. She was no longer allowed to take part in the meetings of the Sabha. Daughter was looked upon as a source of misery, while son was supposed to be the light in the highest heaven. Now, Manu writes, a woman during her minority should obey her father, after marriage should obey her husband, and during old age should obey her son. Now, practice of polygamy now was prevalent. However, practices like sati, child marriage, parda, female infanticide did not exist. Education, still in the time of the later Vedic age, was open to women. Dr. R.K. Mukherjee writes, women of those days had access to the highest knowledge and played their part in the intellectual life of the country. Then comes the family. See, family still remained the important aspect of their life. Joint family system was prevalent. Father continued to be the head of the family. Mother too occupied a position of respect and authority. So if you see, these were the 2 points we did in the early Vedic period only, but the difference is in the content. However, in the family, it's still the same joint family system, patriarchal system. The father had full control over the family. Mother was respected. And in the position of woman, yes, there is a difference, because when we talk about the early Vedic period, her position was quite good. She was respected. She could take part in the political matters. She could sit in the meetings of the Sabha. She had the freedom of marriage, right? But here she could not inherit property. She was not allowed to take part in the meetings of Sabha. The birth of daughter was not looked as a great thing. Now, practice of polygamy, which was rare in early Vedic period, now became prevalent. Polygamy means when one wife gets married to various husbands. That was prevalent there. However, practices like sati, child marriage, parda, female infanticide had not existed. Education was still open to the woman. Then, as regards your food, the food more or less remained the same, but there are references to the preparations of milk, rice, and other grains known as chirodhan or tilodhan or mangodhan, right? Other food preparations was called as karamb or laj, right? Then use of milk, butter, ghee, honey, vegetables in food was quite common. Soma juice was considered to be the best drink, and there was no significant change in the mode of building houses and the style of dress. It was still built by the bricks or the bamboo, as we had seen in the early Vedic period, right? See, food, whenever we talk about food, now you'll see that the very important thing which we talk about today is the potatoes. Even if you go in McDonald's or you go anywhere, no junk food can be complete without the French fries. And so you'll find that the potatoes were not kind of available during this ancient period. It was the Portuguese who introduced potatoes in India, right? All right, now about the ceremonies. See, now as I told you, the key word for later Vedic period is complex. So obviously the people started performing number of ceremonies, which led to the growth of the priest, which led to the prominence of the priest also. Now in the later videos, I think the last two chapters which has been prescribed by your university in semester 1 is Buddhism and Jainism. And when we will be studying about those two chapters, the first important reason why those religion came into existence in the 6th century BC, because the Hindu religion had become cumbersome. There were a lot of ceremonies, superstitions attached with the dharam, and the position of the Brahmins became very important. No yagya or ritual was complete without the priest. Now, there were as many as 40 samskaras or rituals. So, this complicated method of performing the ritual increased the power of the Brahmins. Then the amusement, that is, what would they do during their free time? So, that remained the same: hunting, gambling, drinking, music, and dance. But some new forms of entertainment were added in the later Vedic period. You have your silushas, it's just like, theater, the actors playing on the stage and entertaining people. Then is the gathas, the verses sung on by a flute player at great public festivals. So that remained the same. Now, something about the ashram system. Now, actually, ashram means a resting place, but what the ancient scriptures, the Griha Sutras and Dharam Sutras, they talk about that the life of a human, if we consider it to be 100 years, is divided into four parts. Till 25, he is in brahmacharya ashram, where he's supposed to study, get his education, and grihast ashram, where is supposed to get married and look after his children. And it starts at the age of 50, goes on till 75. Vanaprasth, when he was supposed to stay in forest, read the Arnakyas, the forest books, and from 75 he was to assume the sannyasi, and this will continue till about 100 years. So this is how the ancient Indian scriptures talk about the life of a human or of an individual, to be divided into four parts: brahmachari till 25, grihastha ashram up till 50, vanaprastha ashram up to 75, and sannyasi till about 100, 75 to 100. Right? Now comes your four caste. Now, we also talked about the caste in the early Vedic period, but that time I used the word Varan. Varan meant the color, because the Aryans were fair and the non Aryans were dark. And the caste system was prevalent there, but it was like whatever occupation you are in, that is your caste. So we also talked about a hymn where he says that I am a poet, my father is a physician, and my mother is a grinder of corn. So that means they talk about it that everybody was free to take up any occupation, and depending on the occupation, they had their caste. But now, in the later Vedic period, the caste system became rigid, and it was applicable, or it was based on the birth. If you were born in a high caste, you were a high caste. So there were these four castes were compartmentalized: the Brahmanas, then is the Kshatriyas, then is the Vaishyas, and your Sudras, right? So this, the emergence of the four caste has been mentioned in the 10th mandala of Rig Veda in the Purusukta hymn. Right now, Brahmins occupied the highest position in the social organization. Kshatriyas were the upholders of Kshatra or law. They were the ruling class. Vaishyas were engaged in agriculture, trade, craft, and cattle breeding. And Sudras were to serve other three classes. Right. So let's quickly go on to our social life. First, we talked about the woman, the position of woman, then about the family, then about the food, ceremonies, amusements, the ashram system, forecast, and now we are on to the economic system. Now, agriculture as the main occupation, domestication of animals, art and craft, use of iron, and emergence of new towns. Right. Now, agriculture continued to be the chief occupation of land, of the people, sorry, the land under cultivation now increased because we talked about the Aryanization of the southern and the eastern part of India. That means they spread towards the eastern, central, and the parts of South India. So the land under cultivation increased. The implements also improved because of the iron. Now, method of sowing, reaping, harvesting, winnowing, they were just the same as we see today. Now, joint families were quite helpful when it comes to agriculture. There was no class struggle or affection, nothing kind of, which we talk about the revolutions right now, nothing like that was prevalent in that society. Rice and wheat were the main crops. Cotton was also grown. Various kinds of vegetable and fruits were grown in abundance. Now, the change from the Rig Vedic to later Vedic age was the emergence of the class of big landlords. See, this is how in your history we talk about this, that how society progressed from, we talked about the Indus to the Vedic, and I think by the time I will be giving you lectures, I think we'll come till 1947. So just see how the history of India or the history of Punjab transforms in such a miraculous, a beautiful way. Then is the domestication of animals. Now, cattle remain the chief source of wealth. Atharva Ved, one of the four Vedas, mentioned the prayer that the king used to do for having more cows and bulls and horses. Oops. Just wait a minute. Now, besides that, horse, ass, buffalo, goat, sheep, they were also domesticated. Then is art and craft. Now, we did talk about the craft in the early Vedic period also. Here also you have the blacksmith, the smelters, carpenters, tanners, right? They prepared the implements for the agriculture. Leather work was in much progress. Weaving and spinning was very popular, right? Now, there were four type of pottery which was found in the later Vedic period. One is the black and the red ware. Then the other is the black slipware, painted grey ware, and painted red ware. So these four type of pottery was found in the later Vedic period. Now, the use of iron. Now, use of iron was quite common. Various weapons of war like the arrowheads and the spearheads. That means when they kind of make this head, that is this particular portion that they used to make, that was made up of iron, and that belonged to about 1000 BC, and that has been excavated in western UP, Punjab, and Baluchistan. Numerous copper tools have also been found in UP and Bihar, and it is quite presumed that these Vedic people, they did exploit the copper mines of Khetri in Rajasthan, and copper and gold was also used for making ornaments. So ornament was a well-developed industry during the Vedic period. Now, emergence of new towns. Now, some towns came into existence like Hastinapur, Kausambhi, Ayodhya, Mithila, Prayag, and Kasi, right? Okay, so before we go on to the religious, let's quickly just revise what we have done. Agriculture as the main occupation, domestication of animals, arts and craft, use of iron, emergence of new towns, right? Now, let's start with the religious life. We'll be talking about the emergence of emergence of new gods, dominance of the priestly class, the doctrine of karam, moksha, and karam, moksha, and transmigration of soul, and asceticism. So you'll see that even when we talk about the early Vedic period, these philosophical things were not very complex then. The people of the early Vedic age did just worshipped nature and the forces of nature. Their mode of praying was the yagyas, right? Or their when the Hotri would chant the hymns from the Rig Veda. But now you will see the complexities because people now believe in the doctrine of karam, moksha, and transmigration of soul. So quickly, let's do it. Right. Now, in the Rig Veda, we talk about Indra, Varun, Agni, Surya. So they were the bright gods of the Rig Veda period. They were worshipped. But now in the later Vedic period, they had lost their former importance. So the new gods came into prominence like Rudra, Vishnu, Brahma. They attained a higher position, very, very important. Rudra came to be known as Shiva or Pashupati. Side by side with Rudra arose Vishnu, who soon occupied a place of honor as the protector and the preserver of the people. So whenever we are talking about the philosophy of the Hindu religion, it dates back to the Indus Valley civilization and the Rig Vedic age or the later Vedic age. So obviously the old gods like Varun, Surya, they did lost their former importance. Now the new gods were Shiv, Pashupati, Rudra, then is Vishnu and Brahma. And Vishnu occupied a place of honor as the protector and the preserver of the people. Now, this is also important. See, priestly class became more important. Why? Because now the religious ceremonies became more elaborate, complicated, and expensive. Hence, it increased the importance of the priestly class of Brahmins. There were certain sacrifices which could be performed only by 16 or 17 Brahmins and lasted for about months. Now, vegetables, food, rice, milk, they were the common offerings to the god. But in the later Vedic period, animal sacrifices, soma offerings also became very common. The individuals made offerings to Agni in their house. So the important thing here is that the priestly class became very important. And again, the other two religions that we will be talking about, Buddhism and Jainism, they were an kind of an religion which stood against the dominance of the priestly class, right? So during the later Vedic age, yes, the ceremonies became more elaborate, complicated, expensive, and the animal sacrifices also became important. Then the doctrine of karam. Karam means that as will you sow, shall you reap. That it is on the basis of your karam, your previous actions, that how your life would be. The moksha, that is the salvation or the freedom from the cycle of life and death. Transmigration of soul, wherein it says that soul does not die, soul is immortal. And so these kind of philosophical things became quite important in the later Vedic period. And when we talk about the literature, I think I haven't posted a video on the literature, and because in the early Vedic period we only had one important literary work, that was Rig Veda. But in the later Vedic period, we'll have the other three Vedas. We'll also talk about the Brahmanas, the Upanishads, and Upanishads, which amount to about 105 or 108 in number. I'm sorry, I've just kind of forgotten the exact number. So these Upanishads, they will talk about, for the first time, they will talk about the philosophical things about God, about universe, about soul. So all these things become important in the later Vedic period. Then is asceticism. Now, another feature of the religious thought of the Aryan was the glorification of the aesthetic way of life. Aesthetic means when you give some kind of austerity or some kind of little difficulty to your body. It believed in the life of tapas, right, and brahmachari and detachment. So actually asceticism believed that the life of tapas or brahmachari or detachment might lead to greater results than the rituals and the yagyas. They also believed in the theory of karam and rebirth. So, whenever now I'm teaching about the history of Punjab. So, whenever we talk about the history of Punjab and its culture, it's absolutely rich because Punjab has been the birthplace of three important religions. One, the Hinduism, number two, the Sikhism, and Islam in India. Because if Islam came in India, the first place it reached was Punjab. So, obviously, another feature of Punjab was the asceticism that was glorified by the Aryans because they believed in the life of tapas, brahmachari, detachment might lead to even greater results than the rituals and yagyas. They believed in theory of karam and rebirth, right? So that is all I have. I think I've explained you the later Vedic age. We've talked about the political life, the social, economic, and the religious life. Now what I would suggest you to do is that if you have listened to this slide, I hope you have understood some part of it, and then go back to your books, read about it, and I'm sure the whole topic will be quite clear to you. Thank you so much, and I will see you soon with a new video, right, on Jainism and Buddhism. Bye bye, and take good care of yourself.